Hello everyone, thanks for taking the time to join us on this iGov Live webinar today. This morning we'll be hearing from Andrew Bolton, the Deputy Director, Head of Data as a Service at the Department for Work and Pensions, Tim Vincent, Senior Technologist at Confluent, and Nick Butler, who's the Public Sector Account Director at Confluent. If everyone's ready, let's meet our speakers.
Hello everybody, welcome to today's online talk. Today we're going to be delving into how real-time data in the public sector drives operational decision making, but also digital transformation and innovation. We have perhaps slightly controversially named this event the data-driven disruption of the public sector. My name is Nick Butler. I head the UK and Ireland public sector business at Confluent. And I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Andrew Bolton from Department for Work and Pensions. And he's joining us today along with Tim Vincent, who's our Head of Solutions Architecture at Confluent. The audience will definitely not want to hear too much from me, so I can safely say the combination of Andrew and Tim will make for a very interesting 30 minutes. So in welcoming Andrew, please tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and your journey to being appointed as the Head of Data as a Service and Head of Data Practice at DWP.
Good morning. Thank you, Nick. Yes, my name's Andrew Bolton. I'm in the Deputy Director, Head of Data as a Service role in the Department of Work and Pensions Digital Group and report into the Chief Data Officer. In that role, I have just over 200 people in 20 feature crews and customer crews, and we build data products and deliver data services internally to DWP, but also externally to other government departments, arm's length bodies and executive agencies. I'm also in the head of practice role, so for those who know that model, it's the Emily Webber community of practice model role. It's very similar to the Spotify model or a professions-based model. I've been in the public sector for only 2 years, so I'm relatively new to it. I came to it from a long career in the commercial sector in financial services, telecoms, insurance, banking, and retailing, building lots of consumer-based products. And all of my career has been operating in the data space. So whether that's in consumer and customer analytics, telemetry and SRE, or product optimization. So very interesting to move into the public sector at this time.
That's great, and thanks for that. Come on, tell us something about yourself totally unconnected with data, work and pensions.
Oh yeah, so I'm a really keen cyclist, and up until 2 years ago, I used to compete at a national level, but in a very niche sport. I live in Yorkshire and I'm surrounded by hills. So I used to do hill climbing, and for up until 3 years ago, had got to the national championships a couple of times. However, I'm in no state to do any of that at the moment because, like everyone else, I've got a substantial amount of lockdown lard, and it's going to take me some time to get back down to my fighting weight. And then get back out and start caning those hills again.
Well, I enjoy cycling as well, Andrew, but I certainly won't be joining you on the hills. Okay, Tim, introduce yourself to us, please.
Yes, thank you, Nick. So I'm Tim Vincent. I run solution engineering here at Confluent. So my career has fundamentally been in data. So I came to Confluent from Oracle, which for anyone who knows data, you can either say like all roads lead to Oracle, or that's certainly what I thought when I arrived at Oracle some 15 years ago or so. However, I then spent 9-10 years at Oracle, thinking I was at the home of databases. I took a little look outside and discovered a whole plethora of databases out there in the world, from NoSQL databases, Mongo to Elastic to graph databases and so on. So I branched out of Oracle and worked for DataStax, who are the company behind Apache Cassandra, which is distributed NoSQL database. And from there, I then first discovered Kafka. Customers I was talking to were looking to break silos in their organizations, move data from legacy systems into some of the newer technologies. And they were always asking, do you connect to Kafka? Do you connect to Kafka? So after 4 years with DataStax, I then joined Confluent, the people behind Kafka, where I've been now for the last 3 years, helping customers with their data in motion problems to not only move data from here to there, but also to transform that data while it's in flight.
Amazing. And do you cycle, Tim?
I do, yes. So, but only recently. It's a lockdown thing for me. So, so just before lockdown, I actually bought a camper van, and of course I couldn't go anywhere, so we would sleep on it on the drive. But part of buying the camper van was to then put cycles on the back of the camper van, so we'd go off into the middle of nowhere or whatever, and then go off cycling. But it's very much sort of leisure cycling. There's no competition involved except between me and my Strava app, I guess.
Good stuff. Okay, let's jump right into this conversation. And if I can start with a question for Andrew, if you don't mind. The dreaded C and B words have loomed large in our lives for what seems like a decade, but only has been a year or two. But can you just sort of summarize for us the most significant challenge facing central government departments in allowing them to both make key decisions, often at pace, at the same time as transforming their systems and processes?
Yes, so we are in the midst of a really major digital transformation, as are most of the large government departments. Obviously, the Department of Work and Pension is one of the largest, if not the largest department. And what we have is a combination of a substantial amount of legacy systems and technologies, which are and have been very good at what they do. They're very Ron-Seal. They do what they say and they can, and they've been running for a very long time. Recently, we just finished a really major work package called VMER of re-platforming the VME environment, and that's been a resounding success. That's been running for a very, very long time. All of the departments have their own heritages. So the DWP was a department that came together from several other departments, and they had their own lineage and heritage as well. And the other major departments, for example, HMRC, have the same. So there's, for me, who's come from the commercial sector, there's a lot of analogy to my experiences in large conglomerates, where there's been a history of M&As and then some integrations, but not always integrating, and some integrations more successful than the others after an M&A. Some decisions about which systems are kept and which are sunset. Also, you know, the same sort of experience in the commercial sector around those being sunset. Lots of historical contract relationship management from the civil service. So one of the major changes before I joined was the recognition to bring in-house a lot of services that historically have been delivered by third-party suppliers, and actually build that digital knowledge within the departments. I think DWP has been very successful at that. Digital Group is around about 4,500 people now, I think. I'm starting to build my network internally to know where domain knowledges are. So there's the challenges have been multiple. One has been around recognizing those historical services that maybe have been third line or third supplier managed and bringing them in-house, recognizing where they are on their journey towards either being enhanced, or whether there's a decision to sunset or to replace, and looking at the people and the skills you need to be able to do that. Recognizing good value for money for public spend, so understanding where we are now and where we need to be next and where we need to be in the future. And then obviously in this last year, it's being able to still do that while being able to pivot and respond to the pandemic. And I actually think we've done in DWP an excellent job at that. So there was, particularly in the early days, there was a wave of UC claimants, and there was a lot of flex in the system. It was very much more agile and responsive than systems would have been historically, is the way we've discussed it internally. There's people's ability to flex that system and then flex our scaling of workforce as well. So we've recruited a lot of work coaches in, and then being able to support those. And all the infrastructure to support that as well has been, we've had to flex very quickly on those things. And that's all been supported by the fact that we've got a digital backbone that's in place, and we've got the right kind of feature crews and customer crews in these spaces to actually be able to respond to the changes, both from a policy perspective, but also from a user need perspective. I think we're still.
Go on, Tim. Go on.
Yeah, no, that's I mean, what you're talking about there is a lot of themes that we see a lot across a lot of different verticals. I was going to ask, do you think that the pandemic has accelerated the need for digital transformation, and have you been able to sort of embrace that acceleration?
Yes, I think it has. So I think there's two different dynamics to that as well. So one is the ability to flex quickly and respond to situations as they arise quickly. And there was, I think, very clearly a difference in teams that had come in from the outside world, so from the commercial sector or from other sectors into the digital space, and worked with that pace of change. And our ability to respond to things like change in just the volume of data that was coming through for the wave of new claimants, and those who maybe had a longer term relationship in the civil service. So I think it was both technology and ways of working. And then the other thing is the engagement with the user as well. So with everyone having to access services in a different way, what it did recognize is that not everyone does have digital access, and digital won't become ubiquitous without other supporting infrastructure in place. Mm-hmm. So the ability for us to stand up those work coaches and give them the infrastructure to support them was important. And some of the other factors, I think, were around the way that our Secretary of State and Perm Secretary enabled us to make decisions at pace. So that's the other side of digital, is the ways working, particularly in agile, around empowerment and the ability to respond to need, both in terms of capability of delivery and the things that are not traditionally associated with the civil service. Maybe as per the news recently, I would maybe refute some of the assertions that we don't have people who can make decisions quickly, and we don't have the empowerment to deliver things quickly. I think manifestly over this last year, we have shown that we can do that in DWP Digital.
That's great. That's great. So you touched on the legacy systems. Have they been able to cope with this faster pace?
Yeah. So I tend these days to use heritage rather than legacy. Yeah. I think it's a better way of describing it.
Yeah.
I think I think the robustness in some of the existing systems and their resilience, I actually think, is testament to how they were built. Right. What we've done maybe in the past is bolt things on or leave them in a run/maintain state. I actually gave a speech, a session recently on the Red Queen effect, about running to stand still and how you need to build in that continual development to stand still and not let technical debt accrue. Yeah. I think that's much more difficult to address in the data space. In data, we are much less mature in things like CI/CD. We're very much more on release trains, and our releases seem to still be very big and very spiky. One of my drives over this next sort of 18 months to 36 months is to help really drive that move to make those release trains shorter and to move us towards a CI/CD philosophy, or again, a way of working rather than a technology in the data space to help us be able to be much more responsive and adaptive. But yes, I think by and large, all of the systems, both in the way they coped and way that the infrastructure and the fabric people responded to their coping, was there was a very high degree of resilience there.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, for heritage systems, as you call them, we see a lot of customers going through digital transformation. It's not about replacing these heritage systems. It's about sort of enabling the data out of those heritage systems, so you can now put it to better use within the organization. So you now have the, once you've liberated that data, you now have the benefit of being able to mix that data from other sources. Is that something that you're moving towards?
Yes. So we've, I think, struggled around the conversation around centralization and federation probably over the last decade. And I think I've come in the last 2 years. We have swung away from that centralization much more towards the federation. So there had been plans for very heavily MDM'd, master data managed, centralized, single sources of the truth. And I think the world's moved on past that. And we're now very much more in conversations around a domain-driven design model. So moving away from a service-oriented architecture towards domain-driven design, around those domains mastering their own data themselves. And then how do you facilitate that interoperability? So one of Evans's other foundational tenets of DDD, that interoperability piece, making sure we can enable that. How does that link with things like enterprise data modeling? From my perspective, enterprise data modeling, I don't think anymore as a centralized imposition outwards, but really it's that enablement of that interoperability between domains. It's in my mental model, it's like the Babel fish from Hitchhiker's Guide to Galaxy. It's that universal translator you can plug in between all of those. Enterprise data modeling really helps in that space. And that's all about accepting that the different domains would have their mastery, but allowing that facilitation and that interoperability piece. And that's all about enabling access then. So that enabling that mixing of data from different sources in a much more low friction way. And we're not quite there yet.
Yeah.
We've explored very much the data mesh model from ThoughtWorks.
Okay.
So building on the data fabric model from previously from Gartner, and we're now thinking about how does that ThoughtWorks mesh model really bolster the Evans's DDD, really facilitate that interoperability in a here and now operational sense between the domains, but also how does it then facilitate longitudinal data for all of our analytics communities need for the production of the regulatory statistics that we're obliged to generate, and also for things like policy analysis as well. So we know that the things we're doing really add value, and we're actually manifesting the policy that we're required to manifest.
No, that's interesting. Thank you. So, so as I mentioned, sort of my background is data. So data in databases, static data, get your data into a database, and then drive business outcomes from there. Since I've been at Confluent, my sort of mindset around data has changed, and I'm kind of interested in your opinion as to what you see as the difference between data. You know, we very easily talk about data, but what is, in your opinion, the difference between data and, say, an event in a system or in infrastructure?
Yeah, I've got a couple analogies that I've used internally. Some of them land better than others. So I have, for me, some of the really great way for me to my mental model to bring this to life is like a train journey. And I use the very simple analogy of a train door opening and closing on a train journey. And you can, so I'm a telemetry geek. I'm a complete telemetry geek. I've been swimming in the telemetry sea for 25 years now. I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
So if you got something in the old world, you would have something that told you that a door had opened and a door had closed.
Yeah.
And it would start at 5 o'clock in the morning and it would finish at 11 o'clock at night, and then someone would give you the taco, the little log of when that had opened, and that was a macro batch data supply. And then you get you get the tachograph, and you would be able to translate that into when the doors were open and closed. And you could do loads of really interesting stats. When it was open, when it was closed, sum of opening and closing, number of times it opened and closed, all that kind of stuff. But you get it the next day, and only after you've taken the tachograph and you've translated that into something you can do that kind of stats on. You're not really interested in the translating, you're only really interested in the stats.
Yeah.
And then, so that's macro batch, and we still have loads of services that do that. So once a day, you get a massive bulk download. And then micro batch is you don't wait until the end of the day. So maybe once an hour, well, it might be quite difficult. So maybe at every other station, you get a tachograph that's just of the time between the last two. So you break it down, and then you can translate. You still got to do the same process, and so you've got to get that tacho. You've got to turn it into opens and closed, but you're inserting small amounts of information at a time. So that's the micro batch principle. And then that's great, but you've got to still wait until you've got those in, and there's still a gap, and you might not be interested in the stations that happened, but you're interested in the station at this particular point. And streaming, which is the sort of the next generation of it, I think, is the train door all the time, just shouting every second, I'm closed, I'm closed, I'm closed, I'm closed, I'm closed, I'm open, I'm open, I'm open, I'm open, I'm closed, I'm closed, I'm closed. And it's got a daytime stamp, might have a geolocation, and it's got its status. And that's that continual pub sub stream of information. Closed, 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 open, 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 closed, closed, closed. If that's been sent to a central unit on the train, the kind of edge principle, and then you still got to harvest it. But if it's got a SIM card in it, you could be collecting that in real time. You always know the status of the door. And if it's geolocated, you can relate that to where it is on the line. You could then know when it's at a particular station, how long the doors are opened and closed. And again, you can do all the crazy stats. You can see which stations have doors open for a long time, all that kind of thing. Which on the tube, which ones do you have them open and closing because someone annoyingly jumps in at the last second? And then events are, there is silence from the door until it opens, and then you get I'm open, and then there's silence from it until you get a daytime stamp, and then it's closed. I've closed. So you've got a daytime stamp with a geolocation and a status, and then you've got another daytime stamp with a geolocation and a status. So it's much less chatty. You don't know, when you're listening right now, you don't know what its current status is. But you've got a much smaller stream which has the things that happened. It opened, it closed, it opened, it closed. And if you've got IoT and a SIM, and you've got the telemetry coming in, you always know its status. And then that's really interesting for if it opens, but it's not at a station. And then that's when SEAM and POM and BOM use cases come in, because then you know it's open when it shouldn't have. And actually you can be alerted. And that's when events are really powerful. They can alert you to a status change that's outside of a boundary that you would expect, some sort of threshold of location. So for me, that's my mental model between macro batch, micro batch, streaming, and events. And for me, that really helps understanding then really good use cases. You can manifest them in a way that most people understand.
You mentioned in the course of that pub sub. What did you mean by that?
Yes. So pub sub to me is a paradigm shift in the production and consumption of data. I came from the kind of somewhere produced it, somewhere it was sent somewhere. That's static landing, source and sync. And the original streaming was very much in that principle as well, source and sync. So someone creates it, it gets sent somewhere, and then other people might take consumption of products that are built from there. Pub sub to me is completely different, and it's a new architectural and a paradigm, but it's also a new relationship paradigm to data. And PubSub is shouting into the whole world. So one person or one thing creates the data and you send it out, but anyone who's got the keys to that data can access it.
Yeah.
And so you have a process around the access of the keys, but anyone could do it. And you don't need to have that hub and spoke model anymore. And it means that this democratizes access to data in a way we've only really started to scratch the surface of. And I actually think that's a fantastic thing. And this, I think it changes the idea around the single source, the single version of the truth. There are things you need to consider, like eventual consistency, and there are other patterns as well. But I think eventual consistency is probably my preferred method. And it changes the dynamic on how you utilize that data. And it does put much more emphasis on those DDD owners around making it interoperable. But I think it's much better principle than source sync, and it allows for a lot more consumption of data to generate insight and value creation.
Yeah, it's effectively, as you say, it's about breaking the silos of data within an organization and democratizing that data. You have to be mindful of the governance of the data around that. So you need some sort of control. So if you have different lines of business consuming some other lines of business data, they're authorized to use it, and B, they know what that data is that's then coming to them. Because you end up with the sort of decoupling, very much the decoupling of the producers of the data and the consumers of the data. Now that enables you to then be more agile. That enables you to then move more towards a microservices based architecture where the data itself, or where the data is residing, is in the contract between the producer and the consumer. But they're still decoupled, so they can be upgraded and changed without affecting the entire system.
Yeah, that loose coupling is really important, particularly in resource-constrained environments, which essentially everywhere is. And if the resources, the development capability, whether that's people or time allocation, and historically, that source sync model created in the sync a developmental bottleneck and made everything tightly coupled. And I think there's been a lot of effort in the rest of the digital community around front end, back end, and loose coupling, which is only now rolling into the data space and disaggregating monoliths. Have seen some patterns where essentially they become joined at the database monoliths. So it's driven down maybe by 2 layers. But again, one of the things that I'm striving for us to do is move away from that, and streaming does help with that. The whole nature of PubSub, the stream table duality, allows you to separate these things out and also allow people to glue things together from different places. On the governance, I would completely agree. I'm actually a really big advocate of really good metadata, data quality, articulation. I think that should be part of your API contracting to have that DQ capability, and also lineage. So having that kind of data glossary, so data cataloging, business glossary, metadata, and DQ and lineage are essential parts of that relationship in the modern paradigm. And they're the things that facilitate the creation of mesh and fabric, because they allow you to have that, both that trust contract, but also a really important thing for me is that understanding of upstream consequences to developmental change, so breaking changes. And so I'm a big advocate of enabling developers, front-end, back-end developers, service developers, to have access to the upstream lineage of the things that they're creating or changing, and making sure that they understand what the upstream consequences are to those changes. So again, it's actually connecting that primary producer, primary consumer, not in a sort of tightly coupled monolithic sense, but actually in a definition of done and consequential impact sense. And I think actually that's a much better thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we typically see our customers are on a journey with regards to event streaming. So the first kind of phase of that, there'll be sort of a particular use case within the organization, and it will be, as you describe, you know, pub sub. The first kind of phase will be, right, okay, I can now do the decoupling of the producers of the data from the consumers of the data. I can now make this data available to a whole slew of consumers, and then the governance and data lineages all tied in that. The next phase that we see after that is then, okay, so I'm streaming this data, say, from multiple producers into my central repository. We're Confluent, so we'll call it Kafka, and then my consumers are consuming that. But what is extremely powerful in that paradigm is now the ability to use stream processing. So the ability to then join these multiple producers of the data, and then get these real-time insights from that data while that data is in motion, while that data is in flight. And something that attracted me to Confluent, the company, is the fact that we have this KSQL language, which is like a streaming KSQL language. And for me, as a database person, this was kind of the light bulb moment, because, you know, being databases, I know about SQL. If you want to pull a record from a database, you say, okay, give me the record where name equals Tim. We go off to the database, we pull the record back. The light bulb moment for me was where you have KSQL, which is the same SQL statement that's running in a streaming application, but in this instance we're pushing the data through the SQL. So we're not going to the database and pulling a record out at a snapshot in time. We're actually pushing the data through the SQL, and then anything that then matches the where clause or whatever you have on there is then filtered off. And that could be the anomaly that you mentioned earlier on your on the train carriages. So you're looking for these anomalies. Maybe it's a fraudulent transaction, a fraudulent claim. Maybe it's ensuring that somebody has their appropriate benefits in place based on the data that you're getting from multiple systems that can then be presented to somebody who's talking to that person over the phone in real time. And it's when our customers make that sort of move, the first step is the pub sub, democratize the data, but from there it's then joining those streams of data together. And you mentioned something about the stream table duality. Inside Kafka, you can maintain those two things. So you can maintain this stream of information, and then you can also materialize that data at a snapshot in time to then have this table. And it's the phrase is used a lot. It's like the database inside out type of approach, where inside the database you have a commit log inside, which is sort of like an implementation detail inside a traditional database, but inside Kafka it is a first-class citizen. And essentially what you're getting is every event over a period of time. And this also enables you to do time travel, so you can actually travel back in time. So maybe you have some sort of algorithm that gives a certain result. You make a tweak in the algorithm. You want to see what the new result is. You can replay back in time and run that same set of events through that algorithm. So that's extremely powerful.
Yeah,
sorry, Andrew. We've run out of time, but can I just ask you one last question, Andrew? And based on conversations you and I have had in the past, I know something that is very close to your heart is around knowledge and expertise, and having the people that you have doing this work, having the opportunity to improve their knowledge and improve their expertise.
Yes, very much so, particularly my head of practice role, but that actually came about because of the way that I really like to help people learn, and people have different learning approaches and philosophies. So some people like to read, some people like to watch YouTube, but I'm actually very much a hands-on doing stuff, and that's how things really help sink into my brain. And I think there's some great opportunities to learn with the Kafka philosophy and ways of working with the Confluent suite. There's the free community pieces that you can use. There's loads of material out there to follow. One of my favorite pieces is from Robin, which is on railway journeys. And actually what that also illustrates, what that also illustrates is one of the KSQL other really good things is that it can pull from static data tables, so reference tables. So geolocated train stations is a really good example where you can just integrate that data in with the data from the feed for that static snapshot. So I would strongly recommend everyone accesses the Confluent community, the new forum, but also downloads and spins up their own local versions and has a play. It's a really great way to learn. And that's something I'm really going to be advocating a lot more over the next, like I say, 18 months, 36 months. So people can do the prototyping and proof concepting at work, but also can do that exploratory and sort of get that experiential learning as well.
Andrew, thank you very much. I must say, if anybody from Network Rail is listening, I'm sure you're going to be getting some phone calls. New job opportunities. I can't believe the time has flown. Thank you both very much indeed, in particular you, Andrew, for giving up some time in your very busy schedule. Keep the questions coming in, people. There is a means for you to ask questions. We will try where we possibly can to follow up on everything that is being presented to us as in the form of questions. Suffice it to say, thank you again to both of you, and have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick.
Thanks for that very interesting discussion, which I'm sure will have got a lot of our audience thinking. Some very great points raised. So thank you everyone for speaking on those topics. Thank you also to everyone who's attended. Just so you know, if you've sent in a question, our speakers will be working through those and they'll come back to you offline directly to answer any questions you have and expand on that if you think of any more questions in the meantime. Thank you once again for joining us, and I hope to welcome you to another iGov Live webinar again in the future. Have a great day.